Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan Phillips, President of the Asian Chamber of Texas. Welcome to our webinar on the impact on immigration. And with the new Biden-Harris administration taking over in January, we will have a whole new set of policies, and amongst the many things that are on the top of their docket, immigration will also be there. And to tackle some of these most difficult questions and to discuss what could be potentially coming down the pipeline for us and how that's affecting our communities, both business and just general people in general. We have our esteemed board member, Miss Massey Badmus, to be able to deliver this information to us. It's my privilege and my honor to present her today. Anne is one of our board members, of course, and we're so fortunate to have her. She's a principal attorney and founder of Badmus and Associates. She represents immigration clients all over the world and believes immigration is the American way and keeps our country strong by positive contributions of our immigrant business owners, professionals, advocates, and community leaders. As part of her advocacy for immigrants, she founded the Immigrant Journey Awards to spotlight outstanding immigrant contributions. She also founded the Immigrant Entrepreneurship Network to foster and support immigrant entrepreneurship in the U.S. Anne is a partner in the immigrant advocacy organization, New American Economy, and a member of the Dallas Welcoming Communities and Immigrant Affairs Task Force. Her advocacy and professional efforts have helped hundreds of clients achieve their American dream. Anne has authored a book and has been featured as an immigrant expert on numerous TV and radio news programs. Anne has also authored several books, but her honors include Best Lawyers in U.S. List, Best Lawyers in Dallas by D Magazine, Icons of Humanity Best Immigration Lawyer of the Year Award, congratulations, and Alumni Wall of Fame Award from the University of Delaware. Without further ado, I present to you Ms. Massey Badmus. Anne, please take it away.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Susan, and the Asian Chamber of Texas for hosting this business briefing. And good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So, as Susan mentioned, our purpose today is to kind of give you a brief overview of where we are in immigration today and what we think might happen or possibly predict might happen under the Biden administration based on what the administration is, or Biden-Harris administration, based on what candidate Biden had stated was his immigration plan or policy. But in particular, we're really going to focus today more so on the business related immigration. I mean, immigration is huge, as you all know. We hear about it all the time in the news, but there are so many aspects of it that we could not possibly cover today. But what we'd want to focus on today really is how it relates to what employers and businesses can expect from immigration. So I first want to start off just by saying I've practiced immigration law for nearly 30 years through the Clinton, Bush, Obama, and the Trump administration. And without getting into politics, I'd have to say that the last 4 years has been the most chaotic and challenging for those who are trying to immigrate legally. Our legal immigration system is extremely complicated, and in my experience, it's often unfriendly for most people, regardless of who's president. So that's what keeps us immigration lawyers in business. But I think most immigration lawyers agree that Trump administration's hostility towards legal immigration and its attempts to actually reduce legal immigration has really been unmatched by any other administration in recent history. We've seen an extraordinary number of changes. I think there was a count of over 400 changes in immigration rules and policies and directives. And along with that, we've seen, as many of you have heard in the news, an unparalleled number of lawsuits filed against the government for its immigration policies. Many of those lawsuits having been successful because the courts have determined that the government has not followed process or gone beyond what the law or constitution allows. So as you can imagine, those of us in the trenches of immigration are relieved. And hopeful that the Biden administration will bring, from our perspective, some positive changes over the next 4 years. So, like many, and as Susan mentioned, I believe that immigration is critical to the growth of our economy. And I just want to briefly just talk about a recent study from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas that found that without immigration, the U.S. economy would struggle to grow. It would be stagnant. Quote, it says that slowing labor force growth is a product of a number of factors. We have an aging U.S. population, retiring baby boomers like myself, and declining birth rates. So this is, but another element of our slowing labor force is immigration. So immigrants and their children historically have contributed more than 1/2 and currently contribute more than 1/2 of the workforce growth in the past 20 years, 2 decades. So the economy expands with growth in the labor force and its productivity. And due to the retirement of baby boomers and population aging, as I mentioned, immigration will likely play even a larger role in our workforce growth going forward. So the report says that absent any offsetting increases in productivity growth, less immigration will translate into slower GDP growth. And unfortunately, according to studies that looked at 10 advanced economic countries to identify and evaluate the best immigration policies that would promote economic growth, the US ranked 9 out of those 10. So our immigration system, according to experts who look at this, does not seem to keep up with the times and be modernized to the extent where we are contributing through immigration to the economic growth. So it seems that President-elect Biden seems to agree that the immigration system needs to be improved for economic benefit of the nation. So according to his pronouncements, in the first 100 days in office, he has outlined plans to modernize the American immigration system, try to reaffirm the country's commitment to refugees and asylum seekers, establish effective border screening procedures, and welcome foreign nationals into the U.S., so become a more welcoming nation. And in fact, he specifically has stated that he plans to reverse many of the policies that have been implemented under the Trump administration. So we'll go over some of those policies today. As I mentioned, there's just not enough time to go over all of them, so we'll briefly go over the ones that are particular businesses. Trying to move here we go. So for background, I just want to quickly review how immigration is administered in the United States. These are some of the federal agencies that are responsible for immigration law administration. There are many, many others, but these are the primary ones. And the Department of Homeland Security, which has 22 agencies under its purview, has the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Customs and Border Patrol agencies under its oversight. And so the Department of Homeland Security is really the agency we primarily look to see how immigration will be administered, the policies that come out of that, and of course, the Biden-Harris administration is the chief executive of this agency. Just to briefly explain, the USCIS, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, is what we call the benefits agency. They are the ones responsible or receive applications for visas, citizenship, green cards, just about anything where there's an application in order to get an immigration benefit. USCIS is the agency that most people who are immigrating will encounter at some point. Then we have ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which we hear about quite a bit in the news, and they are the enforcement, as the name implies, the enforcement agency to ensure that, or responsible for starting a removal or deportation process for those who are determined or that it believes has legal status in the United States. And it's also important, it is also the agency that employers need to be aware of, because it is the agency that enforces the employment verification rules that all employers are responsible for the I-9 forms that every employer must complete. So that agency is responsible for that. And then the CBP, or our Border Patrol, these are the agency that patrols the border, as you mentioned, the northern and southern, or as you would think, the northern and southern borders, but also not necessarily physical border, but if you've done international travel, as you know, you will encounter the CBP, who screens everyone who comes to the United States, whether a citizen or not. So what's exciting for many, immigration practitioners is that the President-elect Biden has indicated that he will submit Alan Mayorkas as the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And so if he's confirmed, he really has a lot of historic firsts for this DHS department, for the department. He will be the first Latino and immigrant to lead the DHS. So many believe that choosing him alone signals a significant change in direction and perhaps a more welcoming policy towards immigrants and refugees. Mayorkas has extensive experience in immigration administration. He was in the Obama-Biden administration. He served as the director of the USCIS for about 5 years, and then he was also deputy director for 3 years just before the transition to the Trump administration. So there's a lot of excitement about that. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the travel and visa ban. So this is something that has been really new to the administration of immigration administration, something we've not really seen before the Trump administration. And it affects a lot of people in the immigration process, even those who are business workers, business travelers, people who want to immigrate and start businesses in the United States. It does affect those. So the most infamous one was that most people probably can remember on January 27, 2017, President Trump signed his, for lack of a better word, the Muslim ban, which immediately impacted thousands of people around the world. Now that executive order banned entry to the United States for 90 days of nationals from 7 Muslim majority countries, such as Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Sudan, and Yemen. And that was supposed to last for 90 days. It also banned the entry of all refugees for 120 days and indefinitely banned the entry of all Syrian refugees. As many of you might know, there were several lawsuits about this ban, and it even went to the Supreme Court, who pretty much allowed it to continue. And although it was supposed to be 90 days, it has been 4 years since this ban has been in effect. And so it has, and also has expanded to other countries as well. So as a result, many people who had applied for immigrant status, such as parents of US citizens and other family members of US citizens, have been waiting all this time in order to finally join their families. Even though they've gone through the process, they've done everything that they were supposed to do legally, because of this ban, they've not been able to immigrate. And it includes some workers as well. Another proclamation that's more recent and related to our the COVID-19 pandemic, on April 22nd, there was a presidential, of this year, there was a presidential proclamation that suspended the entry of most new immigrants. And immigrants, when I'm saying immigrants, means those who have applied for permanent residence in the US. It had suspended the entry of most immigrants for at least 60 days. However, that ban has been extended to December 31st, so the end of this month. And we're not, it potentially, since President Trump is still in office, he could extend it further. And that might actually happen. But the proclamation stated that the reason for the suspension is concern about the impact on foreign workers on the US labor market, particularly in light of what we saw as high domestic unemployment and depressed demand for labor at the height of the pandemic. However, this ban has really affected thousands of close family members again, regardless of what country you're from. The ban affects many of those family members of citizens and permanent residents, and basically put them on hold. It's also affected workers who were approved to get visas to come and work for companies who had gone through the sponsorship process from coming into the US as well. So we have quite a few, I guess, delays and people being able to immigrate because of this ban. The other ban was on June 22nd, 2020, which kind of followed up for the April ban and also was related to COVID, or so the proclamation stated. It suspended the entry of high-skilled workers, such as H-1B workers, J-1 exchange visitors, L-1 visas, which are for transfer of employees from multinational companies. It suspended that right now through the end of December 31st, again, based on the fact that it believed that the administration believed that the entry of these workers would further depress the US labor market. However, the individuals or the occupations that are subject to this ban really are STEM fields, technology fields, healthcare, different fields that we've not seen a significant unemployment rate for those. And in fact, it's been pretty steady and low. So Microsoft and a few other large companies who often use these types of visas, they sued the government and they won, meaning that their workers that were exempt from this ban so that they could actually enter into the US and get their visas and enter the US. And the reason they won is because the court stated that the government could not prove that foreign workers actually did depress demand for labor in the United States. However, that lawsuit only applied to those people those companies that actually were part of the lawsuit. So that leaves thousands of other workers, especially for small businesses, who are still subject to the ban, which is, again, December 31st is supposed to be the expiration of that ban. However, it could be extended. So President-elect Biden has stated that he will rescind what he states are un-American travel and refugee bans, including the Muslim ban. He's not specifically discussed the bans that I just mentioned related to the COVID-19 situation, but it's pretty much, I guess, thought that he will also rescind those bans as well. These are presidential proclamations, so the president is the executive that can actually remove these bans. There are several other types of bans that are going on, again, related to COVID-19, which are more for health reasons or healthcare reasons because of the pandemic. There are several countries that are restricted, or countries, not necessarily nationals of the country, but there are travel bans restricting people coming from certain countries such as Canada and Mexico. And this is not US citizens. These are people who are not US citizens or not permanent residents. And there are some other exceptions as well. But people who need to come into the US with a visa are banned if they're coming from Canada or Mexico, UK and Ireland. There's a specific area of about 26 European countries that are suspended from coming into the United States, and China and Iran and Brazil. So what that means is that if you are present in any of those countries for the past 14 days, you are not able to travel to the United States. You would basically have to go to another country that that's not banned, stay there for 14 days, and then try to enter. So this applies for people who are even doing a layover. Let's say if you book a flight from India and it stops in UK at the airport in London, you're not allowed to come into the United States unless, actually you're not allowed to come back to the United States because you've been there for 14 days. So those bans, since they are health related, we're not sure if they will be extended or removed at this point, but those are bans that everyone who has any travel plans should be aware of. In particular, everyone who has travel plans and is not a US citizen or permanent resident should be aware of, and should also be aware of the exemptions as well. So that's the travel ban issue. And again, I just want to remind people that if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat, and we are screening for those, and we will be answering as many questions as we can in the time allowed. But also keep in mind, we are looking for general questions. We cannot answer for confidentiality purposes any questions that are specifically about your case. Specific cases, I would suggest to contact an immigration attorney for those types of things, or those types of questions. So next, I'll talk briefly about the impact on work visas. If anything can be said about the Trump administration as far as its what has happened over the past 4 years and the impact on work visas, it would probably, that one word would be restrictive. We have seen a very restrictive view of applications for work visas. And again, this is a legal process, so people are applying and attempting to get through the legal process. And there have been so many changes that have been implemented to actually restrict work visa approvability and make it really more difficult for people to apply for these types of work. Because and in fact, it's pretty much worked because over the past 4 years, we have experienced, and the data shows that there's a reduction in legal immigration overall, but also as it relates to work visas as well. So some of the areas that we're going to cover today would be areas where we feel the most impact, and we'll talk a little bit about work visa eligibility evaluation. That is one of the areas where we have the restrictive view has really taken hold and has caused a lot of changes in how we process applications, how much time it takes, how much it costs, and also the success rate of those applications. We'll also talk about DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, Temporary Protected Status, and the H-4 EAD. And we're talking about those because there's a huge number of people who hold those hold work authorization pursuant to these types of status, and these individuals or these types of statuses have been, or the Trump administration has tried to reduce or eliminate these types of work authorizations, which would have a huge impact on employment and the economy as well. So even and then the last, we'll talk about case processing backlogs, which has really also slowed down the process and made it frustrating for people who are in the system itself. So we'll talk for skilled workers and even foreign students in STEM fields. As I mentioned, we've seen reductions in visa approvals largely because we've seen a reduction in immigration through those types of workers because of the large or because of the increased denials of applications. And there are many types of work visas. I think for time's sake today, we're going to focus mainly on the H-1B visa in particular. And as many of you probably know, the H-1B visa is what we call our professional worker visa. Those who have at least a bachelor's degree or the equivalent of a bachelor's degree or higher are eligible for these types of visas if they are working in a position that does require a specific degree or a specific background. This visa is very much in demand. There's only 80 for new applicants for this visa, new meaning that you've not ever had an H-1B visa or there's been a significant lapse since your last H-1B visa. If you're a new applicant, you have to compete every year for about 85,000 visas. And in the past few years, we've had over 200,000 applicants compete for those H-1B visas. So we have what's called an H-1B lottery, which causes, which basically gives people who are trying to get this H-1B visa maybe sometimes anywhere from 20 to 30% chance of even having the opportunity to apply. So there's a huge demand. It is an employer driven application, so it's meaning they have a job that's available for this H-1B worker. Okay, so this slide really kind of gives a good overview of what I was saying as far as the denial of the H-1B petitions that we've seen and the huge increase that we've seen over the past 4 years. Starting with fiscal year, if we look back at fiscal year 2009, we had a denial rate of about 15%. It dropped significantly over the Obama administration. And then when the Trump administration took over, we see a denial rate up to 21% at this point. So that is very significant. And this is for new visas. Now, there has also been an increase in visa H-1B renewals. So H-1B visas are typically issued in 3-year increments. So someone who has received an H-1B visa can work for that employer for 3 years. And then if the employment is extended, the employer can apply to extend that employment. We've seen a significant number of denials of extensions of work authorization, even though the employee is working with the same employer in the same position that was previously approved. And there really has been no real change in the law as to qualification for that type of visa. However, the USCIS pretty much changed its policy to honor past decisions and instead decided to look at even renewals under the, I guess, the view of Buy American, Hire American policy, which basically looks at trying to pretty much deny applications if possible. So as a result of denials for continuing employment, many companies reported they had to dismiss really long-term experienced employees, even those who have been waiting for their green cards for many, many years, because that green card process for many can last 10 years or more. And then if their H-1B status ended, with the ending of their employment, their H-1B status, the employment ended, and some companies were able to transfer their employees, those employees to another country, but many were had to terminate those employees, and the employees had to leave the U.S. So that's sort of the overview there. But recently, the Trump administration, in furtherance of its crusade, for lack of a better word, to reduce legal immigration, decided to pass 2 immigration rules related to H-1B and PERM green card processes, making them again more restrictive, more prohibitive, especially for small companies who are applying for these types of visas for their foreign national employees. So basically those rules attempted to increase the required wages by up to 20% for employers to pay for H-1B workers and for green card applicants. And it also sought to narrow the number of occupations that could qualify for H-1B visas. So effectively, it would have eliminated many occupations, qualified occupations that would have been qualified in the past, but no longer would be qualified, especially in the IT areas, especially in marketing and some other business analysts and things like that. So these rules, however, they were recently litigated, and the federal court pretty much overturned the rules, or not overturned, but basically stated that the rules could not go into effect, were invalid, and mainly because, again, of a process failure. The government did not follow the appropriate process to implement these rules. It pretty much in October said, we're going to have these rules, it's going to start in December, we're not going to give the opportunity for the usual process of being able to comment and hear from the public about these rules, which typically takes about a year or so to do. Instead, we believe because of urgent circumstances, COVID-19 in particular, we think we need to implement this rule immediately, because really what we're trying to do is to make sure that U.S. workers are not impacted by immigrant workers, and then especially within the COVID-19 pandemic situation. However, the court stated that the government did not prove, again, that there was any impact on the labor force, or there was anything taken away from U.S. workers by the fact of the approval of these workers. So since they hadn't proven the urgency that they had to do this now because of this impact on U.S. workers during the pandemic, they could not proceed with that rule and would have to go through the normal process. So it's unlikely at this point that the Trump administration can now go through that normal process, because by the time they get started, the Biden administration will be there. And even if it started at that point, the Biden administration does have the ability to withdraw that rule and perhaps propose a different rule. So we're not quite sure what the Biden administration would do with this type of rule if it does go into, or if it does get started into the rulemaking process. However, it's unlikely, again, that it will continue in the form that it was written. There is one other rule I'll just briefly cover before I go on to the next, is the H-1B lottery. As I mentioned before, there is because of the high demand for H-1B visas, there is a lottery process that takes place where essentially everyone who wants an H-1B visa, or every employer who wants an H-1B visa for their employees, submits an application. This year was a registration process. They put in basically the name of the employee, date of birth, basic data, and then the lottery was supposed to be a random lottery where just basically I believe a computer generated lottery where the 85,000 people or 85,000 potential applicants were picked out of the 200 and some thousand that applied. So the Trump administration does have a proposed rule in place that does have to go through the process. It is not completed yet, but that rule relates to the lottery, and what it is stating is that they want to give priority in the lottery to those who are going to be in a higher paid position. So it's really going to be pay-based wage selection type of lottery if they went into place, meaning that those who are more entry level or those who are in fields that may not necessarily have as high a wage requirement will have less chance of being approved. But again, this is a proposed rule, and it's unlikely, especially in the Biden administration, that it will be implemented. So next, I just want to briefly again talk about those other visas that or other work authorizations that I mentioned. I'll first just talk briefly about the H-4 EAD. This relates to the H-1B visa that I just spoke about. So spouses of H-1B workers are receive H-4 status. Now, typically with H-4 status, there is not a work authorization allowed, so the spouse is not permitted to work. He or she can attend school and pretty much do anything else that's legally allowed. However, they're not allowed to work. Under the Obama administration, there was a H-4 EAD, employment authorization document, made available to H-4 spouses if the H-1B worker was in the process for the green card. And in many cases, this was very important because that green card process can last, especially for those from India and China, could last 10 years or more. So basically this H-4 EAD really introduced about 100,000 or more workers into the workforce. And the Trump administration had announced from the beginning that it was going to withdraw this rule and no longer allow this type of benefit for H-4 workers, H-4 workers, I guess I will put it that way. However, it never finalized the rule, so the H-4 EAD is still available if you qualify. It is something that we believe that will not be withdrawn through the Biden administration, and will more than likely continue absent any legislation that would change it. The other area that I'm sure most of you have heard of is the DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, that was established in 2012 under President Obama. And it pretty much created, it didn't create a path to legal status or legal citizenship. DACA is basically a deferral of deportation. So basically what it does is that it tells the people who, or allows the people who apply for this benefit to remain in the United States without fear of deportation and to receive work authorization. It is only allowed for certain undocumented minors at a certain age, and it's very specific, so we don't have time to go into that, but it did protect over 800,000 individuals from deportation and pretty much introduced 800,000 legally authorized workers into the economy. In 2017, a national study by the Center for American Progress found that 45% of DACA recipients were in school, and most of those in school, 72% were pursuing a bachelor's degree or higher, and over 90% were employed, and their occupations were anywhere from healthcare professionals, childcare workers, teachers, business owners, and even first responders. So they're pretty much integrated into our economy. The Trump administration attempted to stop DACA with a memo that it issued in 2017, and after very protracted litigation all the way to the Supreme Court, in November 14, 2020, the U.S. District Court for Eastern District of New York invalidated the agency's the memo, saying that that was not the proper process to remove DACA eligibility. So now DHS recently announced that it will accept not only renewals of DACA, but it will accept new applicants who qualify. So these are young people who have been here since 2012, are now currently of age, which was age 15 or older, to apply for this benefit. So we may be seeing a lot more applicants for DACA now that the agency has now allowed that to happen. And Biden has also indicated, President-elect Biden has indicated that he will continue DACA and perhaps even expand it even further if Congress does not act to enact legislation to address this issue. And the last status that I want to talk about was the temporary protected status, which is TPS, covers about 1 million workers. And this very much is under presidential authority. It basically is a protection for those who are from countries that are either war-torn, have suffered environmental damage such as hurricanes, a lot of different natural disasters, and it's just made it difficult, if not impossible, for those people to return back. These are people who are already in the United States under a different status, but because of what had happened with their country's situation, the government gave them temporary protected status to allow them to remain in the United States until otherwise indicated, and allow them to work with the employment authorization document. So the Trump administration had indicated that it was going to stop temporary protected status for most of the persons who have that particular status, those from El Salvador, Syria, Nepal, many countries that are affected by temporary status, or have many nationals of different countries that have temporary protected status. So it's likely, actually, there was a court case, and the Trump administration did win that case. And so they have stated that the Trump administration does expect to let TPS expire for many people as of 2021, October 2021, and some other different dates in there. So with the Biden administration, definitely has the opportunity to change that and continue with TPS, or urge Congress to address the issue as well. And the last area to talk about is case processing deadlines. So another issue that we've experienced over the past 4 years has been a lot of backlogs. Many clients will say, why is it taking so long? It's hard for us to tell why it's taking so long. Some of that may be why an application might take much longer than we've seen in the past. Some of that might be because of the increased scrutiny and restrictions and the way that the government is reviewing applications. Some of it might be because of staffing, but we do know that there's been a backlog for green card applications, which started out as 544,000, and over the past 4 years has grown to 2.4 million. So that's why we're seeing quite a bit of backlogs. I know the Biden administration has stated that it's going to be addressing this and trying to find ways to improve the efficiencies of the system. So that's another area that we think might be improved by the Biden administration. However, that is something that cannot really happen in 100 days. We would imagine it may take several years to really get back to the previous faster processing times that we had before. And this includes applications like citizenship applications, which generally take about a year or more, where in the past it was 90 days. So the last area before I go on to questions real quick would be just talking about different legislation that the Biden administration has indicated that it will propose. Now, legislation, is a difficult process. It has, the president alone cannot do anything in terms of enacting a law other than to sign off on legislation that has gone through Congress, through the House of Representatives and the Senate. But Biden has indicated that he plans to introduce an immigration bill to Congress that will increase the number of visas available for workers, permanent residence for workers. Right now, we have a work-based green card process that's limited to 140,000 each year, and also limited to, and that 140,000 is allocated based on place of birth. And so as a result, many of those who have applied, as I mentioned before, from India and China, which has a larger population, have experienced long delays. So he's proposed changing that, hopefully, which is long overdue, in terms of really modernizing the worker process, so that those who qualify for green cards through that process will not be restricted by that number, or at least the number will be expanded. There's a couple of other areas as well, but I'm going to pretty much just talk lastly about the proposal that Biden has stated that he wants to make to Congress, which is to provide a roadmap to legal status and potentially citizenship for those who are already in the United States without lawful status. This is something that's been talked about for years, and my immigration practice has been talked about for the past 30 years. It's been proposed before. It is a very difficult legislation to put through, but we'll have to see what happens. So we'll see if that actually is imposed. So that kind of is the end of the presentation. I want to give some time for questions. So Susan, are there any questions that we can answer?
We did have 2 questions
Okay.
that were submitted. After the approval of I-140 and submitting all the paperwork for I-485, how long will it take to receive the EAD, travel documents, and then the green card approval? And what is the chances for denial of the green card at this step? And what would be the reasons?
Yes, so that kind of goes back to, and this is a question we get all the time, because that goes back to processing delays that I talked about. So if we're looking at the current administration, it really depends on a number of factors. Depends on where you live. It depends on the number of applications that the government is receiving at any given time. Depends on their staffing. So all we can do is pretty much estimate, and it may not necessarily be a good estimate as to how long it will take to receive any approval, whether it's the EAD or the green card approval itself. Oftentimes, the government will post on the uscis.gov website. If you go to that website, there's a section that says case processing times. You could click on that link. It will give you basic information as to what the estimated processing times are. It is not a hard and fast rule. If they state that they are processing in 12 months or 15 months or whatever it is, does not mean they actually will approve your application within that time frame. That is just what they're saying is the average time. There are many who have taken longer, many who are shorter. Because there are millions of applications being submitted. And so there's just not a way, as far as I know, that they can really streamline it, that they haven't been able to streamline it to the point where it really is first in, first out. So sometimes you will have someone who applied at the same time and they got approved before you. That's from a number of factors, and it really does not indicate that your application has any problems. It just means that your application is taking longer because your application may be still in a queue, hasn't moved on to the next step simply because of the processing procedures within the USCIS. So as far as EADs, all I can say is as far as average time, the government is saying that can take anywhere from 6 to 8 months for them to issue an EAD. Sometimes it takes less. We have seen faster approvals, but again, that is no guarantee. So, all I can say is that we basically go by what the government says is their average time, understanding that it is not a guaranteed time frame as well. As far as the green card approval, the I-485 approval timing, we are told, depending on where you are in the country, it can take anywhere from 12 to 24 months to be approved. It depends on whether or not you are scheduled for an interview. During COVID-19, interviews have been waived in many instances for employment applications. So that has shortened the time somewhat. So that, if you're fortunate not to have an interview or not to be required to have an interview, then you might see a faster processing. But again, it depends on all of that. As far as denials, typically, if you have your I-140 approved, then you qualify for that employment opportunity. Then the I-485 is a process for screening your admissibility. So admissibility means, have you done anything else that we would consider a problem for you to enter the US? So they're going to look at your criminal history record if there is any, but they'll always do that, of course. They're going to look at your immigration history and see whether there's any issues with that. They may even, nowadays, especially in the Trump administration, they may even broaden it as far as deciding that, okay, maybe they've gone on your social media and they don't particularly like what they've seen there as well. I mean, it seems kind of extreme, but recently the government has indicated that adjustment of status, which is a green card application, is a discretionary benefit, meaning that they have the discretion, even if you are otherwise admissible, you haven't committed a crime, your health record is good, your immigration record is good, but you can be denied in their discretion. Now, we think that's a pretty broad standard. We think that it goes beyond the law, actually, but that is a possibility. But on average, I would say most applications are approved. So if you don't have an issue with any of those things like criminal history, any health issues, mainly infectious health issues, things like that, you should be able to be approved.
Could you tell us a little bit about the number of people that were deported or sent back to their home country, especially during this last few years under the Trump administration?
Yeah, I would like to, but unfortunately, I don't have those numbers. That's not an area that I actually review quite a bit. I think that the policies have changed. Under the Obama administration, there were, and many people believe that the deportation rate was higher than ever under the Obama administration. However, there was a criteria set for that, which was basically those who had criminal records and a couple of other issues was the criteria for determining who would be deported. Whereas under the Trump administration, there was no criteria. If you were out of status and could not fight your way through the court system, deportation system, then you would be removed. And in many cases, they did what's called expedited removal. They expanded the eligibility to do that, which means that without having to go through the court system, they could actually remove you if you were within, I think it's 100 miles of the border, but I think they expanded that so that they can put you on an expedited removal track. So I know that has increased quite a bit, but overall numbers I'm not aware of at this point. I'd be happy to locate that and send that out to the chamber.
Yes. There was another question, was after getting the H-1B visas, what's the approximate wait time for approval for people that are submitting from the Caribbeans?
The Caribbean, so I think they mean from getting the visa at the U.S. Embassy in the Caribbean. So this is assuming, I'm not 100% sure on the question, but I believe the question relates to someone who has to apply for an H-1B visa. So there are two ways that you can start your H-1B status. Either you're in the United States in a legal status, for example, in a legal status such as a student visa, and you get approved for H-1B. So if you're in the United States, no matter what country you're from, your status will change to student status to H-1B status as of the approval date, as of the first date of validity of the H-1B approval. So that happens pretty much automatically if you're in the United States. However, if you were approved and you were not U.S. Embassy, except for Canadian citizens, you would have to go to the U.S. Embassy to apply for an H-1B visa, what we call H-1B visa stamp, to put into your passport. And then once you get that from the embassy, you can come into the United States as an H-1B worker. Now, if you're in the Caribbean currently, currently the embassies with COVID-19 are pretty much half staffed, and they're very, very slow on issuing visas or even having visa appointments. So there's been quite a bit of backlog there. So it's hard to tell. In the Caribbean, we haven't noticed quite a bit because I don't think there's as many applicants in the Caribbean. However, if currently with the travel or the visa ban that I mentioned earlier, which extends until the end of this month, if your H-1B has been approved and you were not in the United States as of June 22nd, 2020, then you're going to have to wait for that travel ban to expire in December. If it's not extended, you're going to have to wait for that in order to even apply and get a visa. So hopefully the ban will expire if you're on this month, and then you would be able to contact the embassy in order to schedule an appointment. And if they are still operational as possible, you know, it could be a month, it could be two. We had one applicant who was trying to get a visa appointment, and they told him August of next year, which is absolutely ridiculous. So hopefully that will change.
This one came from Alea Kabani. How long is determination of prevailing wages taking? Are they affected by the pandemic? And is it taking more than 3 months nowadays?
Yeah, on average, we're seeing about 4 months. It's really ridiculous. It might be affected by the pandemic. I know that, I mean, the USCIS and the Department of Labor is the agency responsible for prevailing wage determinations. Okay. They are operational. They do work home. So I'm not sure why it's taking that long, but generally we're seeing 4 months. You can go also to the website. It's called flag.dol.gov, and there they also have time frames for prevailing wages, perm applications, and a couple of other applications. So you can kind of get a gauge on it, and they'll also indicate what application date that they're working on. So if you applied in June 2020, you know, it may say they're working on June 2020 applications. So that's a good place to see where they are. It doesn't guarantee that they're, you know, actually working on your application, even if you did apply at the time that they're reviewing, but it is a good indicator.
Right, right. Very good. Would you be able to provide those resources, a list of resources? We can always send it out. Sure. To to our you know, attendees after the after today, so sure, they have access to all of this great information that you're providing. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Okay. This is, will there be more J-1 visas waivers, J-1 visa waivers available in the Biden-Harris administration?
Okay, so I think there's different types of J-1 visa waivers. I think probably we're thinking of, there's a specific J-1 visa waiver for physicians who have completed their residency or fellowship training with a J-1 visa. And the J-1 visa requires that once they complete their training, they must return back to their home country for 2 years before they're allowed to get an H-1B visa or get a green card. So the J-1 visa waiver allows them to waive that 2-year home residency requirement and work immediately in the US with typically medical practices or hospitals that are in underserved areas where there are not enough physicians to serve the population. So the J1 visa program is administered by the federal government. There's a limited number each year for each state to issue a J1 visa waiver, which is 30 per year. There has been talk about increasing that number or reallocating numbers when a state doesn't use all of its numbers, moving that number over to another state that does have a greater need. So it's possible that is one of the areas that the Biden administration is wanting to look at in terms of being able to get more healthcare workers into the U.S., especially physicians in areas that are underserved and not, having enough access.
Fantastic. And I think we can squeeze in one more question. Okay. Maybe we can try anyway.
Sure.
I think I don't think we've touched on this. Are there any policy changes for applying for travel permits? And it says I-131, and if your I-829 is currently pending, do you suggest applying for one traveling overseas for a few months?
So yes, the travel permit is, well, if they're I-829, it sounds like they've already gotten conditional residence through the EB-5 program. I'm not sure exactly where, but I'll just say generally on the I-131 form itself, there's different types of travel permits. If you're looking for what's called an advanced parole document, which is something you receive while you're waiting for your green card application approval, or a reentry permit if you're a permanent resident. They are still issuing those. I haven't noticed any significant changes. I don't know specifically I can't really advise for a specific situation whether you should or should not travel. I would really encourage you to contact either me directly or your immigration attorney to really determine, for your specific circumstance, whether it's a good idea for you to do that, to engage in travel.
Got it. So, Anne, thank you so much for this, all this enlightening information. I will call upon you again in the near future. I know there's so many changes. It's a moving target, right? So
yes, it is.
And
yes.
I think we need to have this conversation again. I think maybe towards the first quarter. So I'm going to invite you back at that time. So you can present the even more changes
yes.
that have been implemented. And yes. Hopefully this is for the better, with all the changes with the administration. We're hoping that it seems to be going in a different direction, which is great. Yes. Yes. I want to thank you so much for doing this on behalf of the chamber, and for always being the biggest advocate for our immigrant communities, and for being the voice of the voiceless sometimes. So thank you for your all the work and the great work that you do here. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for putting this on. It's very important information. So
absolutely it is. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and just, address any other questions through, you can always email us. If any of you have other questions, we will definitely direct it to Anne and have some sort of, oh, there I am. Apologies, everybody. My computer blew up on me at the very last minute. And so I had some issues with it, but we want to keep this dialogue open, and we know that for many of us, this may be the only avenue for you all to get some general information about this. So we want to keep that dialogue going. But by all means, reach out to Anne directly if you have some specific information or you want to use her as your attorney moving forward, even better. But on that note, we want to say goodbye. Just keep an eye out for our networking mixer next week. We have a fantastic opportunity for you to meet all of our board members, such as just like Anne, and other businesses and individuals like yourself that are looking for a way to engage in our community in a greater way, and from a business perspective as well as from a community and social perspective. So I want to invite all of you listeners to reach out to us. And on that note, thank you so much for coming and taking the time today to join us. And stay tuned for more amazing webinars in the near future. Take care, everybody. Adios, goodbye, and we'll see you next time. Take care.